Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's October 15, 2024. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here back with part two, Gerry Harp. Where in the heck you calling in from, Gerry?
Portland, Oregon.
Dude, I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed reviewing part one. It was so fun. I learned so much. And the great thing is, there's your smile. You laughed a lot. Dude, you're like you're a serious academic poetry teacher, and you cracked up so many times. And that's the whole purpose of this, to have
Oh,
fun. Yeah, I really appreciate it. But you really taught me a lot. And I really respect and honor that you come to our Finnegan's Wake reading club because you add so much to it, because you get when I say, how does these words make you feel?
yeah.
Everybody wants to. I read words not to feel. They know they want to kind of feel, but they really want to learn some logical, rational, left brainy kind of thing, because it's like
Mhm.
highbrow literature. So here I want to start off. There's the great American novel. I'm curious your whole idea about the great American poem, but this idea of the great American novel, Melville or whoever, Hemingway or Salinger, blah, blah, blah. When McLuhan said you can't write the great American novel, the great American novel is the front page of the newspaper, which I think is great because here I am. I look at 2 to 5 newspapers a day, just flip through them and kind of rip out a few articles. And I do pay attention to the advertising, and there was a full page ad in the big newspaper LA Times, and here's the middle of it. Poetry of time. Like
What's
how
that an advertisement for?
I don't even want to give it, I don't want to even tell you what it's for, but it's something. I don't know, it's something.
Yeah.
Exhibition poetry of time. Like it's
Wow.
some mall exhibition. Like the guy I'm interviewing tomorrow, he calls it not capitalism, capitalism.
Capitalism. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's going to be a long intro here to get you going here. But Marshall said that advertising is the cave art of the 20th century and 21st century. And so that's an interesting idea because he came out of poetry and literature.
Mhm.
People don't realize that he gets on the cover of Newsweek as the guru of TV. He's like, no, he's a literature guy. He's just saying, pay attention. And he knows he's so influenced by Joyce and symbolism
Yeah.
that he says, you have to, in order to understand me, you have to know everything Joyce read and all the symbolist poetry. It's like, good luck. So in studying this, I've learned that the symbolists came out of Edgar Allan Poe. Effects precede causes, reasoning backwards. Basically, I'm going to only give you so much information to swoop you in, and you're going to fill in the blanks like detective novel. Oh, I know what they're going to do next.
Mhm.
And Mallarmé kind of nailed it with his quote, like, don't paint the painting, paint the effect you want to have
Yeah.
on the painting. So there's the second part, we're going to go into time, but the first part is, what is your take or thoughts on all that I just blabbled on and on? Anything come to mind, or you
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's just because I was just talking with my students about this a little bit in one of my poetry courses. Um, it's easy to forget, even though we've had a whole critical movement based on the dynamic that the reader is the co-creator of the text. Um, there and with an anecdote that I commonly use to illustrate this is something attributed to Hemingway. I don't know if it's biographically true of him or not, but the story is that somebody gave him a short story to read, and part of his response was, "If you're worried about getting people in and out of rooms, you're in trouble." In other words, you don't need the reader doesn't need you to say, he approached the door 3 steps, 2, then 1, and reached out and grabbed the doorknob, which was hard and cold, and he turned it to the left, which released the door, etc. If somebody shows up, I can infer they came through the door. So a reader does that. A reader just automatically, and once we've really internalized literacy, we don't even know we're doing it, but we're doing it. We're doing that work. And then there's some writers then who really lean into that dynamic and tell stories, through poems or prose fiction or whatever, in highly suggestive ways that really leave more than usual up to the reader. A poet who did this exquisitely, I think, is John Ashbery. Read a John Ashbery poem, and I might be hard pressed to tell you what exactly is going on, but it pulls me in, and I start making connections, and I can play with it. I just did this in class on yesterday. It was yesterday, in fact. And we were talking about Finnegan's Wake. Finnegan's Wake is maybe the text par excellence who does that, because as we learn in our group, we can make all kinds of historical connections that he seems to be playing with, but there's a lot more going on in that text than just that history. I mean, if he wanted to tell us that history, he could have just done it straightforwardly. There's so much more going on in that text that relies on a reader making their own connections. And I think that's what McLuhan constantly did. That's why he was, I think, constantly drawing from the Wake for his own insights. So that's my initial response to your
really
question.
good, Gerry. Let's stay on that for a second, because I like co-creator. Another person calls it active reader. And I think, is this what Marshall was implying? I think maybe when he updated medium as the massage mid-career to the user is the content.
Yeah, I think he's playing with that idea.
Yeah.
And so he's anticipating what would become reader response criticism. But I think typical of McLuhan, so he arrived at that insight and then he moved on to something else.
Yeah.
I don't think he was real interested in hanging out with a single set of ideas and seeing how far he could develop them. He was interested in what came next.
That's really good. Yeah. You really do that well. It's sort of like why I think of you in terms of how Harold Bloom does it, I think, really well. And Umberto Eco, I think, got it from Newton. You stand on the shoulders of giants and try to look farther.
Yeah.
You settle for what's been already done. Then how do you go beyond that? How do you take it a little farther? So then you get the ad, Poetry of Time. What a great, I'm going to go shopping there, Poetry of Time. So, one of our members in our wake group is Decio, and he is from Brazil, and he's all into nautical lifetime. And he brings in all this sailor stuff into the wake. He says the eye is space and the ear is time.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to read a couple things. This is Finnegan's Wake, page 12. We may see and hear nothing. And so Joseph Conrad, his ambition, this is Wall Street Journal, Jeffrey Myers wrote this. Joseph Conrad's ambition, as he explained in his preference of his story about the ship Narcissus in 1897, was to recreate and intensify reality and, quote, by the power of the written word, to make you hear, to make you feel, it is, before all, to make you see that and no more. And it is everything. So there's a lot going on there. Then there's Thomas Rice in Cannibal Joyce, a book. He says that all the variations of war, there was a dialogical relation in the wake. There was Sean and Shem, eye and ear, space and time,
Mhm.
death, stone, life, and tree are unresolved. So this is binaries.
Mhm.
And then lastly, Dante I think it was Duncan told me he tried to eliminate time and space and wanted to go to paradise. You got to go beyond time and space. So, any thoughts on this? Like, why would this ad say the poetry of time? And then, you know, this whole binary of the eye is space and the ear is time. Any thoughts
Yeah.
on all? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I have a couple of thoughts. One is I think we could say that poetry is time, depends on how you frame it. You know, maybe the most powerful example of that is John Cage's 433.
Yeah.
You set aside 4 minutes and 33 seconds and it becomes a performance. You know, it takes on its own significance because it's been framed. You know,
Frame.
it's been set apart, it's been given a name,
Yeah.
and then it becomes a work of art.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's that the ongoing symphony of John Cage that involves a note being played every year. I think we
Yeah.
talked about that before.
That's beautiful.
Something I find fascinating.
Yeah.
So time framed is
Yeah.
poetry. You know, and we talk about things like, you know, meter is about timing. And well, time, and just now we're talking about timing, you know, which is a use of time. I really emphasize this with my students a lot, that one of the things that poetry has in common with comedy is the importance of timing.
Wow.
um if I use two or three too many words to articulate the punchline, the joke is no longer funny. If I use two or three too many words to articulate the last line, the poem is no longer moving.
Yeah.
And you know, we talk about poems and works of art as moving. Time moves.
Yeah.
Time is about moving,
Yeah.
and that, you know, feeds into, you know, what we mean by a poem being spiritually or emotionally moving.
Yeah.
And I think as to the other, and this kind of, I think it feeds in to the other issue I was thinking of that you brought up, that binary of the eye and the ear. You know, we do have to turn them into separate categories to be able to talk about them, but then we have to reintegrate them because
Yeah.
they never really exist apart from each other. Um, there's a book by Gabriel Josipovici called Touch.
Yeah.
He begins with this little meditation on the ending of the movie. Um, is it City Lights by Chaplin, where he's the little tramp is working to pay for a flower seller's surgery so that she could have her sight restored. And so she's never seen him, but she's sold him a flower every day. And after she has her sight back, and of course all this is taking place without dialogue, you know, silent screen, no subtitles for this last scene because it's just about them physically interacting. um she recognizes him because she recognizes his touch
Yeah.
when he's paying for the flower and she's handing it to him. And there's this just marvelous, you know, her face lights up. There's this marvelous interaction at the end. Josipovici makes the point that unless your consciousness is embodied and knows what it feels like to move through the world, you could not make sense of that scene. You would have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's just an example of how, you know, the senses work together. I can't really make sense out of what I'm seeing visually without an embodied sense of touch.
Yeah.
And hearing is woven into that as well, as is
That's
taste and
oh,
smell. But we don't have a very sophisticated vocabulary for taste and smell.
yeah. No, you nailed it because that's McLuhan's great line, "To the blind, all things are sudden." And just going back a few moments, Jerry, I was gonna enter this one in. The Incas regard time and space as one single concept, pacha, Pacha. So
Mm,
they don't they don't differ because why is the eye space and the ear is time? You delved into that beautifully, and then I'm curious how Chris Marker, the great filmmaker, said, "How do we escape time?" And you're reading a poem, you feel lost in it, and you don't. There's time has gone away, or music, or a
yeah.
film, or just walking, or anything, breathing. We can escape time, but basically, our kind of rational linear left hemisphere is always kind of making us conscious that something's going on and we don't we want to lose set track of time. And then there's Proust in his writing about time, the experience of being in time and losing track of time.
Yeah.
So how does he accomplish that? Is that through poetry or being a novelist? How did Proust do that, and did he do that?
Mhm. Well, as Auden says, is in when I walked out, as I walked out one evening, you cannot conquer time.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, it's actually the church bells in the poem who say that. How does that go? Oh, that's such a
Yeah,
great poem. Let not time to, yeah. Um, I mean, we can't really escape
yeah,
time, but but yes, I remember Father Ong used to talk about this quite a bit. That there's clock time, but we don't really live in clock time. We live in psychological time. We live in time as we
yeah,
experience it. And yeah, there are those, and time and the self, I think, are interwoven, and like in the examples you just talked about,
yeah,
or like I think I experience it most often when I'm working on a poem of my own, and I finish my work session, and then suddenly realize, oh, I haven't been here.
yeah.
I disappeared during that time, and it's just
But
marvelous.
do you're rejoicing at that, or you're
Yeah,
saying, "Oh, yeah,
rejoicing. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
isn't that amazing?"
Because it's kind of a the way I interpret that, it's kind of a disappearance of ego,
Yeah,
and just my innermost energy is active,
yeah,
kind of integrating with what I'm doing. If I were to allow myself to speak in big terms, I might even say integrating with the universe and being open to God. It's a kind of prayer.
yeah. It's really good what you said. I wanna go into that, but first, one more on time and space kinda was this is portrait of an artist as a young man. The first phase of apprehension is a bounding line drawn about the object to be apprehended. An aesthetic image is presented to us either in space or in time.
Mhm,
What is audible is presented in time. What is visible is presented in space.
mhm.
So again, he's separating that binary, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, that idea. There's really something to it. I think, do well to pay attention to that. That sound specializes in time, vision specializes in space, but they're never entirely different. I
Yeah,
mean, if I'm hearing something, it's because sound waves are traversing a space to enter into my ear.
yeah,
Space is obviously always involved. Um, in one way I can know space, like Father Ong talked about how you can learn a little bit about, say, the interior of something by knocking on it. listening. So spatially, is this object solid or hollow? So they're interactions, they're blurry divisions, but only blurry divisions among the senses.
Yeah. That's good because I want to have a salon with all these Joyceans in is Finnegan's Wake an object or is it a book? Because of that word object there. But you kind of anticipated this one too, I ask. Two of my film heroes have a mantra, ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And the great jazz pianist Cecil Taylor says he's just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through him. Is art making, poetry, writing more self expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Do I have to stick by that binary?
No, you don't have to do anything. you
Um,
know, my things are just prompts to, have conversations. So, yeah,
yeah. Um, well, definitely. Yeah, I'm picking up on the latter part of your question
yeah,
first. That we're always interacting with our technologies, and we need to be.
yeah,
That's how they become part of us, and that's
yeah,
that's how they become more human, and we extend what it means to be human by our interaction with technologies. So just the way oral poetry changed when writing emerged, and the oral poetry got written down, and then new types of poetry started emerging.
yeah,
That needs to continue to happen. For years, as to I think the larger question about where's the poetry or where's the art coming from, I can only speak of my own experience. For the longest time, I would share this with my students, partly as a cautionary tale, that the great struggle that I've had trying to write poems is getting in my own way.
yeah,
Like if I would write a line that was somehow surprising and sound like something I'd never done before, for reasons I cannot to this day explain, it would scare me. And then I would start doing what was familiar. I would just go to the familiar. And you do that, you do what you've already done 100 times. It's just automatically 10th rate or so. One way my psyche started helping me deal with that is I would have dreams where I would see language. Um, I'd wake up and remember it or think I would. I mean, who knows what we exactly carry from dreams into wakefulness. But my wife at the time, we're divorced now, and she's an excellent, very prominent poet. She would she would we would trade poems to um critique, and she would say, "Oh yeah, she would isolate a phrase or a line and say, "Oh, did you dream this?" I said, "Yeah," and she said, "Yeah, it has that magic." But she could
but
tell. She could
but
pull
did
those
you
lines out.
right? But did you take that as a compliment? Like I want to keep that in.
Oh yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
liked her using that word magic. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Um then several years ago, I had a very serious mental breakdown. I can't remember if I talked about this before. I've dealt with depression and obsessive compulsive disorder my whole adult life. And I've had four very serious breakdowns. The last one was the most serious. And finally, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So yeah, I'm a real cliche. I'm a twice divorced poet with bipolar disorder. Lowell did it so much better than I can. Um,
Yeah.
but somehow I don't know if it's the way I'm meditating now or just what happened neurologically going through that breakdown or the change in medication, but I've
Yeah.
gotten out of my own way.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I became a great poet. As John Berryman said, if you have to know if what you're doing is worth it, if you in writing poetry. You better do something else because
That
you
makes
don't get to know. So I make no claim, but I'm writing better than I ever have.
yeah.
Whatever,
That John Barry that John
what's that?
Barry, I have to interrupt. That John Barry's so amazing because I always say Warhol says, "Don't worry what people think of your art, just keep making it." And
Yeah,
then, McLuhan says the Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. It's so hard to even consider making anything art without going, there's a market out there for it. There's approval, there's disapproval, there's reaction. How many hits did you get? You
yeah.
know, I mean, it is like ridiculous, but how we did the cave artists have that same thing? You know, we don't know if it's in us innately to have this connection thing. And you brought up a lot there. I wanted to just go back because one line McLuhan said I love that you touched on is carefully make plans, then do the opposite.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
good luck, because you find it comfortable. And then Dante, and back to the vehicle thing, are you more a vehicle or more self-expression? Dante prayed to the muses to help him. So people go, well, vehicle could be muse, you're tapping into something, you use the word God, whatever. Then now 80% of people, Gerry, answer, is it more this or more that? Is it more self-expression or more vehicle? It leans a little towards people go, no, it's more self-expression.
Mhm.
And then I follow it up with the question, can art making be egoless? And you kind of already touched on it. That's why I wanted to shoot that question in. Can art making be egoless? Can poetry writing be egoless?
Yeah, talk about the ego is a tough thing. I mean, because I've written about my breakdowns. That shows up. A lot of my life experience shows up, but I sort of I play with that too.
Yeah.
Uh, like I've got this poem that I was working on recently. It's about being at a downtown, um, and being at this procession of nuns, uh, you know, um, protesting social injustice, and catching the eye of one of the younger nuns, really cute nun, and starting to cry. And she comes up and takes one of my tears and puts it in her breviary, and then takes me by the hand over to the river, dips my hand in the water, and kisses my palm. And I say in the poem, I wish it happened otherwise because it's just not credible. But I have to go by the facts. Now, in literal terms, none of that poem is true. None of that happened. Part of what makes it credible is that I say it's not credible and I wish it were otherwise. So, part of what I'm interested in is playing with these boundaries between the fictive and the real. And because and again, one of my students, I keep referring to my students. Well, I have great students, so I don't mind referring to them. One of them said the other day, when we were talking about this, she said, even if I'm telling you a story about myself that's perfectly true, I'm selecting details. I'm framing it in a certain way. It is a fictive act. It is an act of fiction of making
Yeah.
in some way, even if it is true. And it's not that I don't believe in a distinction between what's true and what's false in a world of an anything goes news cycle. That's a distinction I think we have to keep in mind, but we also need to keep in mind the blurry boundaries between those two.
So well put. Would you call the nun poem somewhat Menippean satire?
You know, I've studied Menippean satire only a little bit,
Yeah.
and I really don't think I have a very good grasp of what it entails. How would you
Well, it's
describe
hard. I
it?
know I describe it as using the medium you're working in as part of it. So if in the middle of your poem you start talking about writing your poem and what you're doing in the poem, that's a form of manipulative satire. I mean, the
Yeah,
best
so yeah,
example, yeah, yeah, that's
based
what
on that,
pop,
I'd have to say yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, and
the
then, and I just think of it as going meta.
yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's going meta, but it is fun because it's Rabelais, Lewis Carroll, Finnegan's Wake. It's all, it's Eliot telling. Someone told me once Four Quartet has in it the directions on how to read the poem.
oh,
So,
I've read it many times. I don't know where that is.
and so the best example I give, I love is Frank Zappa kind of had a snooty crowd. We're real elitists. We don't like pop music. So he would make fun of pop music. And in the end of a song, we're all boogieing to his rock. And then he sings, "Do you really want to hurt me?" He quotes a Boy George song.
Yeah.
So you see all these dudes go, "What the fuck? I just sang a Boy George song. I can't do that." And that to me is a perfect example of manipulative satire. He used the medium of music to get
Yeah.
you to catch you, and look at yourself a little.
Yeah. That meta move, for
Yeah,
reasons I cannot fully articulate, I have just loved.
yeah,
I think probably since I was a teenager. It's
yeah.
why I love the Deadpool movies, by the way.
Wow, I haven't seen them. I
Oh, they're
probably
just so wonderfully and hilariously meta.
yeah. Okay, so Gerry, let's go into this. What's your guess or hunch was the motive of the cave artist?
And I'm not innocent of a little bit of I haven't done a deep dive into studying about it, but it seems to be something sacred.
Yeah,
I mean, one conjecture I have encountered, I have to say, is that those are worship spaces.
yeah,
Um, so it seems to be a way of reaching toward the holy.
yeah,
And it's not like they're representations of deities that I know of. The cave art, the pictures of cave art I've seen are humans and animals, and I think there's one famous one of a human with an animal head.
yeah,
Um, but just there seems to be something. This might maybe a little bit of a stretch, but and this is just me. I'm not imposing this on anybody else, but it does seem to me that any work of art is some kind of reaching toward the holy.
yeah,
And even really, grubby art. I mean, not grubby in the sense of bad, but
yeah,
art that's about human decadence, like Baudelaire's Flowers of Evil.
yeah,
It's still an attempt to make something artistic and true, even if it's not beautiful in any, conventional way. Well, although I've read many Baudelaire poems and thought, no, that's a beautiful poem.
yeah. Yeah, Louis Buñuel, I would say nails it. Frank Zappa, they're obsessed. There, we have a question that's going to go into what you just brought up, but I want to shoot to this really fast. I talked with Michael Apted, the filmmaker, 40 years ago. I said, "Why do rock video makers feel so obliged to edit fast?" And most people don't know, it really got going big time in the 80s with MTV, but
Yeah.
Abel Gance invented it in 1922, rapid montage. And he said, because in fact, Marty Scorsese says, "I cut my films faster because of MTV." But Michael Apted said, because we've learned to take in information faster. So
Yeah.
I asked the question with the bias: can we literally learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
Oh, I think we definitely can. And here's one thing that makes it convincing to me.
Yeah.
I knew a college student who was visually impaired, so he had to do all of his studies by. Well, he didn't have to. He could have done braille, but he did a lot of listening on tape, and he had a tape player that allowed him to speed it up,
Yeah.
and he would gradually speed it up more and more. It took him maybe months to do this, but he could listen to something so fast that like if I just started listening to it, I couldn't understand it.
Wow.
But he trained his, I don't think it had anything to do with the ear. I think he trained his neurology to take in this information faster and because otherwise it would take way too long to do his homework if he didn't learn how to speed up not just the machine but his ability to hear. So I think that's one example that illustrates that yes, of course we can learn to take in information more quickly. Now it's not the same as wisdom, but it's an important step in how we manage our knowledge.
That's true. And the hidden question really is it literally possible to multitask?
That I think is I think that's really something separate. According to what I've read, and at least my experience corroborates this, no, we can't really multitask. What we can do is have two things going on at once and in very short order switch between one and the other.
Yeah.
Now, if I can take it, again, if I'm processing information quickly and doing what the other thing that we do, and that is sort of filling in the blanks, then I'm in effect multitasking, but it's not really exactly simultaneous. It's back and forth.
Yeah. I love that you're a good listener, Gerry. It really helps me. You've sussed out a lot of my questions from different angles than the norm. So it gives me that it gives me a bigger picture view. So what's more important, conviction or compromise?
Oh, wow. I think one needs the conviction that compromise is important.
Yeah. I get
I'm
that.
trying to in some small way, I'm trying to deconstruct the binaries.
Yeah, no, that's it. Don't worry. That's I've gotten that. The great writer Walter Board, he started the East Village Other with Ishmael Reed. He said the conviction to compromise. Okay, in your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
Luck, ambition, and skill. I got lucky in encountering good mentors.
Yeah,
And finding them at a moment in their lives when they were receptive.
yeah.
Because I was this dumb kid. There's no reason why they should have taken me in, but they did. So that was Father Ong. That was Clarence Miller, the great Renaissance scholar, Erasmus Moore scholar, and those are two in literary scholarship, and then Donald Justice in poetry.
Very good. T.S. Eliot said poetry's outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
My inner dialogue is in the language of anxiety.
Wow, I've gotten that. Is perception reality?
Yeah. Although I think it means different things. I haven't. I'm hesitant to say, but I've really been interested in reading lately about some of the more contemporary movements of theory. So one's post-humanism, which I'm very interested in. As one of the post-humanist scholars said, it's not that we're not human anymore. It's just that we're changing so much and so rapidly. We need a new name. That's partly with our sense of connection to the rest of the earth and the living tissue of the earth, and our interaction with our technologies. So it's really conversant with a lot of McLuhan's and Ong's emphases. And then there's
Yeah.
another one, the new materialism, and the next book I want to pick up. I've just read about a little bit, meeting the universe halfway. But if I've understood the blurbs correctly, it's the idea that perception and the real in some sense, have to meet to create reality.
Yeah.
So the really, and I think I've misstated that because I said the real as if it precedes that moment of meeting. So I need to read that book so I can develop my vocabulary better to answer that question.
Who's the author? Meeting the Universe Halfway? Do you
Yeah,
know?
Karen Barad, Barad, and she's actually trained as a particle physicist, but she also writes these books in um, contemporary theory.
Right. So it's more academic. It's not like pop, like Kurzweil or those
Right,
guys.
right. There's more. Yeah, these. This is academic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's more academic, yeah. Well, no, one thing I'm gonna scoot in really fast is Bob Dobbs. You might check him out a little. Not anyways, it's complicated which one because there's several. But he came up with this term, the android meme. And it's that humans imitate the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, and
Oh,
then the hidden psychic effects take over in the machine. They talk to each other, and the humans disappeared.
wow.
And
Oh,
then
that's. I'll
I
have to
mean,
look that up.
we've disappeared. We've disappeared into fucking TikTok land, and we're not even there. These things are just happening, and he's really quite the McLuhan Wake scholar, but he's really fringy. And I'll send you a couple little things. But
Oh, great.
anyway,
Yeah, please do.
it's just the android meme idea is what you're trying to find these words. You're not going to find that in those kind of books usually. And yeah, and I love his perception reality. Lily Tomlin said, reality is just a collective hunch,
Yeah.
you know. So it's like, let's go into the binaries a little because I'm curious. Your what's the difference between art and science?
It's a matter of emphasis.
Wow. Because, okay, I'll give you a couple quotes and you can go off on it. This is Cocteau. Art is science made clear.
Several years ago, I had the college where I teach, Lewis and Clark College. I had a job. I had a course released to be what they were calling a faculty fellow, and it was my job to try to encourage more faculty student interaction outside of class. And so I would have faculty member as a guest in the lounge of one of the dorms every Monday evening. And I would start off with a couple of questions. Students there would then have their own questions. And then I would ask follow up questions, that sort of thing. Of course, I had several scientists, science professors from different areas of science, and math professors. And I don't think there was one instance in which they were not eager to talk about the beauty and elegance of their field of study. In fact, I even asked one or two directly. So, is it true that you went into your field of study more for aesthetic than intellectual reasons? They said
Oh my
yes.
God, that is amazing. Yeah, you got ESP because you anticipated the next binary. But were you done there? I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I was done.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because here's a couple more science. I want to do science and art, and then we'll go into another binary. Um, this is McLuhan. When we push our paradigms back, we get history. When we push them forward, we get science.
Yeah, I think if pushing means reshaping. In other
Good.
words, I think science can't work if we're always just looking for more of the same.
Yeah.
Science and really art, again, this is another meeting place of science and art. They both have to be not just open to, but looking for the new.
Yes. Wow.
And they're just two different ways of doing it.
Yes. That's what you're good at is you're a wordsmith. reshaping is such a good word for Marshall picking pushing.
Mhm.
Here's Chomsky. We learn more about ourselves from literature than from science.
Yeah, though I hope that, well, my advisees who are specializing in creative writing, I always encourage them to take science classes because they need to be doing their writing in the world as it actually exists, insofar as we know it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as long as we have literature that is informed by science in conversation in some way, it doesn't have to be, um, full of scientific terms, but it has to be in some sense in conversation with science, knowing that we live in an evolving and unfinished cosmos of which we're a part, and also unfinished and evolving. That kind of literature, yeah, that's going to help us.
Well, Gerry, I'm going to slip this binary in and then go back to art and science because it fits perfect.
Okay.
What's the difference between metaphor and literal? If all words are metaphoric, then what's isn't literal metaphor? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
that's sort of
that's,
a trick question, but you know, any thoughts on that? How do we deal with that one?
yeah. Literal is the metaphor that we've forgotten as a metaphor.
Yeah.
Metaphor is actually a good example of metaphor. Um, Metaphor in its etymology means to carry across. Metapherin, which is what metaphor does. It carries one group of associations, from one source to another, and then that sparks new possibilities. So metaphor itself in its etymology is a metaphor of metaphor.
It sounds like a Alfred E. Newman line because one of my favorite McLuhan rewordings. I want to have a salon. I want you there. You
Okay.
bring your 3 favorite aphorisms. Don't tell the other participants. Then you say the aphorism, and then you immediately go around the room and everybody rewords it. Like that's a high demand. So,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
is. Yeah.
but it's listening and having fun. But Marshall's was Robert Browning. Our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is heaven for? And Marshall said, our reach should exceed our grasp, or what is a metaphor? Okay,
Yeah,
here's
well,
art.
McLuhan
Go ahead.
was great at that. He
Yeah,
was just unparalleled in his
yeah.
ability to do that.
Arthur Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So, I mean, I like to break it down. You don't have to word any sufficiently advanced. We don't really need those. It's just, is technology indistinguishable from magic? That's what I'm asking. I mean,
Mhm.
is Arthur Clarke kind of onto it, or is that
Yeah, yeah. What I think of there, in terms of, well, what constitutes magic? I think of Derrida's idea of the event.
yeah,
An event is not just something that happens; it's something utterly unpredictable,
yeah,
something unknowable from the preceding position. And I think a lot of technologies are like that. They seem, maybe not for the people who develop them, but to the rest of us, they seem to come out of nowhere. They are events. And an event in that sense is a kind of magic, I think.
yeah.
It's true of poetry. I talked sometime. I can't, again, I apologize if I've said this, or I can't remember if I talked about this last time.
Repeating's good, no
Okay.
worries.
I I teach a lot of creative writing and poetry, and and I've been privileged to teach a lot of really really bright and inventive poets. And every now and then I get somebody I refer to as a magic poet.
Yeah, good.
Um, that they come in with a sense of language and ability to do things that I don't know how to teach. They're beyond me.
Yeah.
all I can do is point and say, keep doing this. I can make I can make reading recommendations or just talk. You know, a lot of times they just come to my office and we just talk. Like one of the magic poets I had years ago, she would come in, and I always knew we had this ritual. She'd come in once a week. She'd hand me her poem, and then I'd sit and start reading it and do out loud what I call phenomenology of reading. So I would just start reading it, and then I'd start articulating the connections I was making, the associations. And it might take me a half hour to get through the poem. In the meantime, she was taking notes, and I'd finish. I'd hand her the poem. She'd say thank you, and then we'd talk about something else.
So she didn't go rewrite the poem. She just loved that you could. It was co-creator. You were being
Well,
truly inspired.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think sometimes
She might, yeah,
she revised them to an extent.
yeah,
It's not that they needed a lot of revision.
yeah. That's amazing, Gerry. Duchamp said the artists of the future will only have to point. So when you said point, and beyond me, that's the magic right there. Because here's the rewordings of Arthur Clarke's
Mhm.
Warren Ellis. Any sufficiently advanced civilization is indistinguishable from its nature.
Mm.
Now, I don't even get that one. Here's Bruce Sterling. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from its garbage.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
Here's a
I got home from campus today and discovered that somebody had stolen my garbage bin.
oh my God.
Which I don't know. Since you brought up garbage, it just that seems to be a metaphor of something. I asked the neighbors about it, and they said, "Well, that's an odd thing to steal."
What a thing to steal. Hey, this is Marshall, an interior landscape. What a great title for a book. 1969. For James Joyce has solved numerous problems which science has not formulated as problems.
Could you say that one again?
Yeah, Joyce has solved numerous problems which science has not formulated as problems. So it kind of reminds me of Tony Conrad, the artist, said artists break laws that aren't even made yet.
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting idea that the advanced art calls attention to limitations that are after the fact articulated.
Yeah. And here's some Albert Einstein's. He's got to weigh in. Religion is out of religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. Here's Einstein. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and science.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean that word mysterious. I wanted to get the actual quote, but I used this rephrasing of Auden that the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that word mystery, and here's the last science one. Uh French historian archaeologist Paul Vinet. Science finds no truths. It discovers unknown facts that can be interpreted 1,000 ways.
Well, despite what that says, I think that's true.
But I mean, that's like you're saying that's Manipian satire. You're saying that is true. But
Yeah.
it's funny because we turn to science for facts, but
Hmm.
then indeed those facts can be interpreted different ways. That's the same as art, right? Oh,
Right.
that's good art. Oh, that's bad art. Well, what about Oscar Wilde saying even bad poetry has genuine feelings?
Sure. Yeah.
Can have genuine feelings.
Absolutely. Though my favorite Oscar Wildeism is it's about I always forget which Dickens novel has Little Nell.
Uh-huh.
He says only a man with a heart of stone could read the death of Little Nell without laughing.
Yeah, I love Oscar Wilde mainly because he said everything's in public domain.
Yeah.
That's true. How can anyone say they own anything? They could, my
Yeah.
my friend, he's in the movie business big time. He says IP, and I goes, "What's IP?" He says, "Intellectual property." I says, "IP on IP."
Yeah,
But here's
Aquinas said that personal property is a fiction because really we all hold everything in common.
yeah,
But that fiction just kind of helps us manage everyday life. It makes things practical.
yep, that's what we need. Yeah,
But then when the idea of ownership though becomes a fixation, then I think it's toxic.
yeah, yeah. Zappa said, "Genius is someone who steals and you can't tell who they stole it from."
Oh
You know,
yeah, yeah, that's absolutely like Eliot's bad poets borrow, good poets steal.
steal. Yeah,
And I think stealing in that context means, appropriating
yeah.
something so fully that it looks like I invented it.
Well, tell me this because a guy told me this the other day, and I've used it many times. Anxiety of Influence by Harold Bloom. You absorb your influence, then you abandon them. And so that I've repeated that as a mantra. That's what I someone told me that's what he said in that book. I go, "That's good, but, like, good luck. How are you gonna abandon them? You're gonna reinvent them and integrate them, blah, blah, blah." Or, like, rooted in retro. Like, my
Mhm.
wife's the greatest interpreter of Bessie Smith in the world, according to the guy who wrote the book on Bessie Smith. But she's not retro, she's rooted in Bessie. She's not doing a retro show. So I kinda like retro and rooted as differently. But, uh, the next a binary, and I appreciate you being able to tackle these, is one you touched on. What's the difference between aesthetics and intellectual and intellect?
It's just yeah, with those 2 things, I think of, like, the old medieval idea of, the transcendentals,
Yeah,
goodness, beauty, and truth. They're just different ways of getting at reality. They answer different questions. So if you look at something as intellectual endeavor, then you're looking for the true. If you're looking at something for its artistic or aesthetic value, it's the beautiful. Or its ethical value, it's the good. But it's all describing the same thing. And I think
r
intellectual and aesthetic does that too. Um,
right,
it's a matter of emphasis. It's a matter of what you're looking for, leaning into.
yeah.
Both have to do with the same thing.
Well, is that Blake, "We become what we behold"?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So we have to be careful.
Yeah,
Yeah. The old idea, I mean, I wouldn't want to be stodgy about it, but the old, spiritual idea of custody of the eyes, I think, has relevant, and we don't need to, I don't think we need to walk around with our eyes down because we might, see something that, would arouse us or something. Yeah, I don't mean to be prudish, but yeah, what we spend our time gazing upon. And I would expand it, listening to, we become those things.
yeah,
So we have to be careful. Like I've got um, I guess, a lifelong interest in the nature of evil. You
yeah,
know, what produces serial killers? What's going on in them? Are they just empty? Are they blanks? And maybe no in literature, maybe no greater exploration of evil exists than Milton's Paradise Lost.
yeah,
But I can only hang around, and that stuff is very important and edifying.
yeah,
I think it's deepened who I am, but I also have to make sure I'm leaning into other things too.
yeah. No, I find you to be a comprehensivist. You touch on both ends of the spectrum. Say, "Hey, there's darkness, but there's also not darkness. There's
Yeah.
light." It's like Leonard Cohen's great, with every crack, there's light. So here's
Mhm.
McLuhan in 57. Gerry, thank you for your time. This is really fun. Classroom without walls. It's misleading to suppose there's any basic difference between education and entertainment. This distinction merely relieves people of the responsibility of looking into the matter. It's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases.
Yeah.
However, it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. So it's sort of like he ends with a concrete kind of theory when he says, "No, I don't have theories." But just suss that out. Whatever pleases teaches more effectively. One guy recently says, "No, whatever displeases." Most people think that pretty much resonates. Whatever pleases teaches more effectively. What does effectively mean, too?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if I'm going to hang with the learning, I at least have to experience some kind of pleasure in being able to confront the displeasurable, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just going to be drudgery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think, oh, entertainment. That's a word that people use when they don't want to take something seriously.
That's amazing. Today we read In the Wake, entertainment. I mean, I've used that word. I wonder if he made that word up or got it from someone else, because we know that entertainment teaches us. I mean,
Yeah,
isn't the
yeah.
Bible and Shakespeare entertaining, storytelling,
Oh yeah,
narrative?
yeah.
So that's teaching us. So, um, tell me one major element of your Gerry creativeness that stayed the same and one major element that's changed in the years you've been doing this.
Okay. I might need just a moment of uncomfortable screen silence.
That's fine.
Mhm.
Silence is totally welcome, dear. If you read my prompts before these things, it says silence is okay.
Oh
But
yeah,
it's
yeah, I read that. I remember.
I'm glad you read it. A lot of people don't even read it. And it's like people can't exist in that world. We're like, I can exist. Take your time. No worry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the latter question is easier to answer. What's changed? It's what I described earlier, uh, about being able to get out of my own way
Yeah.
and to hang out with that sense of doing something I have not done before. What I think has not changed is the sense that it keeps me alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's spiritual practice.
Yeah.
You know, I think I might have said this before. When I was a teenager, I don't know where I got these ideas, but it's just what I thought a poet was supposed to do. I would go sit at the river and gaze at the river and read and write poems, and then I would inscribe poems in the sand for the river to carry away.
Oh, that is cool.
I don't know where that
But
idea.
the fact that you, Gerry, that you did that, because that is the essence of art, is we're so much like, I've got to hold on to it. In fact, you anticipated a big question. I was wondering where I was going to put it in. But here's the quote I was dying to slip in here
Mhm.
somewhere, because I love Joseph Beuys. You know this artist?
No, I don't.
Check him out.
Okay.
Beuy's. He
I
lived
know the
in
name.
Yeah, he's an agitprop. He lived in an art gallery with a coyote, and here's the coolest thing he ever did, I think. He wrote his own chapter to Finnegan's Wake.
That's
But
great.
nobody else thought of that. I mean, Beckett or all these brainiacs, nobody thought, "Well, I can write it." I mean, I had a Finnegan's Wake reading once on the east side of LA to try to get this big hotshot performance artist to come, and this other lady started reading her 2 lines, and then she went off and just started making up lines. I
That's
says
pretty good improvisation if you can
I
do it.
said, Joyce would have loved that, because no one, has paid it. But here's Joseph Beuys' line: "Art alone makes life possible."
Yeah.
Now, I don't know all those words. I just found the quote, but maybe not alone, but that's funny. Art alone. He also said everyone's an artist. So see, you were saying, I'm going to be a poet. I'm going to sit on the river and I'm going to do this. You could have gone to the river and started writing things in the sand and not have declared yourself, oh, I'm aspiring to be a poet or I'm a poet.
Mhm. Mhm.
It
Mhm.
could have just happened. So I love that, art makes life possible. So here's Baudelaire. If you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try to only own the day you're talking, it will last forever.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it reminds me of David Lee Roth, Here Today, Gone Later Today. The questions about the word archive, this is 1400s etymologically keep safe, free from harm. 200 years later, it's what we know and think archives are record preserved as evidence. But then there's Wyndham Lewis. Artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. Baba Ram Das taught us, be here now, live in the
Yeah,
moment. Why do
yeah.
we have to collect this stuff if the whole point of life is to live in the moment? Of
Mhm.
course, I know the history idea, learn from the past, but the Egyptians even put stuff in their coffin with them.
Yeah.
But the two questions are, and you can go wherever you want really with this, is archiving more innate or more invented? And do you have plans for your own archive?
First question. It seems that I mean, if we understand archiving is just the act of collecting,
Yeah.
it's well, see, innate is a difficult word. I go back again to Father Ong. I mean, we're talking about adages, and
Yeah.
Father Ong's great adage is that it's natural for humans to be artificial.
That is a great one.
So we just keep inventing things, and it seems like, yeah, we were going to invent ways to keep track of who we've been to
Yeah,
aid us in who we are going to become.
yeah.
Second one, my own archive. I saved I saved my handwritten drafts of poems, but beyond that, I have no plans.
And, you the what I thought you said of the Ong, which I love that line, is I wonder how much he influenced Marshall in saying technology is the most human thing.
Yeah,
So it's natural for humans to be artificial. Then what does artificial mean? Artifice, art,
art. Yeah.
and we're not the artificial carries baggage like it's negative, like it's
So does
fake.
technology, though that comes from
Technology does too, yeah.
yeah, and though that comes from the Greek word techne, which means art.
Yes.
So it's the same sort of dynamic as art and artificial.
Yeah. In Jean Rouch, the French documentarian film theorist, he says, if I put a camera between me and you, it's more real than if there's no camera. And I would say our dialogues on Zoom are more real than if we were in front of each other. The reason is me and you wouldn't be looking at each other's head only.
Yeah,
Our eyes would be wandering, and
yeah.
it is so much more intense. I mean, I know this from interviewing people for 40 years. And, until COVID started, it was always the hassle of finding a space, making sure the tape recorder worked, all these
Mhm.
various things involved didn't make for this like intense kind of we're both present with each other at the maximum sort of velocity or I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Okay, so Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He
Yeah,
says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness.
yeah.
Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
Well, what comes to mind, I think, my depression, my
Yeah.
lifelong depression, it turned me inward. and I didn't let it just stay there. I turned it toward a devotion to literature, both reading and writing, and then also teaching,
Yeah.
mentoring.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, and I think of all those things as going together. Um, the teaching, the writing, the reading, it's all part of the same vocation.
Yeah.
Um, I'm somewhat interested, though somewhat trepidatious to see. I'm not ready to retire for quite a while, I think, but I don't know. I just don't know how well I'm going to take retirement, because that means a big part of what I do will be gone.
But Gerry, you can go and mentor kids through libraries.
Yeah,
You can still go to coffee houses and meet poets. You know,
chances are
it's
I'll do that.
yeah,
Chances are that's exactly what I'll do.
yeah.
I was going to
And
say, oh, go ahead.
and then hopefully you won't end going to our Finnegan's Wake reading club. And you come to Duncan does Eliot, Ulysses, all these Dante. You know, there's a lot of great reading clubs online.
Yeah. Oh, I don't. I have no plans to give up the
Yeah,
Finnegan's Wake group. Definitely
yeah.
not.
And so, fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when.
When it is turned toward change.
Yeah.
See, I think I've seen people, and I've seen this at moments in the past. I hope in the past, in myself. But some of us, I think, really are angry because we want to be angry.
Yeah.
We seek out conspiracies and such things because we want something to be angry about. And yeah, I agree. Anger can be a very productive emotion, but it has to be turned toward something. It has to be turned toward action, and not destructive action. Like shootings and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Can satire be destructive? I asked my friend who wrote comedy with Robin Williams. He says that's the job of satire. But if me or you do a cartoon in uh, in a certain country, they might kill us. So some people think dying is destructive. Swift compared satire to the mirror, which people could see every face but their own. What's the function of satire?
Well, I think it's the same as anger. I think a lot of
There you
satire
go.
comes out of
Nobody
anger.
ever connected those two. I just randomly have those one after the other. Go ahead. That's amazing.
Oh no, it's just yeah. I mean, satires. I think turn toward trying to effect some kind of change. Not that all literature isn't, but I think satire tends to be more overt in its target and its purpose.
Yeah, Gurdjieff said laughter is a reconciliation of yes and no. And then McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen. Behind every joke, there's a grievance.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know, it's like Jiminy Glick, the interviewers interviewing Mel Brooks, and he goes, "Do you have something against Hitler?" See, yeah, it's even better than a Mel Brooks line. It's like he outdid Brooks.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
what's the most significant difference between men and women, physical aside?
A lot of my students are trans,
Yeah.
and at this moment in history and in my own experience, I really have a hard time leaning into that. That's another binary.
Oh, dude, you when Me Too started, people said I won't go there, and then Me Too kind of went down, and it's still a hard question for me to ask. I sort of have to wonder, should I really bring this up? Really, more what I'm after is what caused matriarchy.
Matriarchy.
Yeah,
Which matriarchy?
That's it. You answered a question with a question, Gerry. You win. That's what this series is all about.
Okay.
Inventing new questions. No, it's more like, yeah, Eric McLuhan said men. And I think the answer is biology because women give birth.
Mhm.
So, like Peter Sellers, a great theater director, said, "A mother holding a child." So it's more like I should say what caused matristic civilization. We've in studying Maria Gambudis and Riane Eisler and all these people, we're trying to get the right wording because matriarchy sounds rule by women.
Right. Yeah.
No, so did women. Well, that's the funny it's kind of a joke, but I'm not saying it's real. The word mafia starts with the letters MA, ma, because
Mhm.
women run the world, but they let men think they run the world. Now that someone in one of my weight groups says, a woman says, shh, don't tell anybody. So I know what I mean, it's just this idea that are we more hardwired for war or more hardwired for a matristic civilization, which means cooperative, uh,
Mhm.
uh, giving birth and nurturing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's hard. I mean, the easy out is just to say, well, obviously we're hardwired for both because we keep doing both.
Yeah.
You know.
But
Yeah.
people want to believe that. They want to believe we're hardwired for war. And so then they rationale this line I don't like to hear. Well, that war was needed. I was like, no war is needed. You could have negotiated something. But they go, no. If they're coming to steal your food, what do? I say, let them take it. But that doesn't mean we can't get over epigenics or whatever. If we're hardwired for war, can we ever get ourselves out of war?
Yeah.
Out
Yeah.
of war mentality, you know.
One thing you make me think of is just, I mean, there are biological bases for these things, but they get constructed socially. And you talked about the image of the mother with child, and because I hear that, and so part of me thinks, well, yeah, that's very beautiful. So is father with child, but I just hear,
Exactly.
but I just hear mother with child, and there's something in me that recoils
Yeah.
because what I'm hearing is all the sort of sentimental baggage
Yeah.
that swirls around that image, and
Amazing.
and it's hard for me not to think that, well, the impulse that feeds into that is a desire to control women, to keep them in quote unquote their place.
Keep them in their place. Exactly. Amazing. What perfect, because I wanted to slip this in. This is a new one I just got. It's F. Schiller, Schiller. I'm
Oh,
not sure.
Friedrich Schiller.
Okay. Poetry. One, a naive mode is ancient and assumes language is a window into reality. That's one way of he looked at poetry two ways. The second way is a sentimental mode belongs to our artificial age and sees language as a mirror to our inner turmoil. Have you ever heard that distinguishing of the two by him? And
No, I haven't.
any thoughts on that? Because I mean, you've covered it, but the naive mode is ancient, assumes language is a window into reality. And the second one is a sentimental mode, belongs to our artificial age and sees language as a mirror into our inner turmoil.
I think it's a stained glass window into our inner turmoil.
Oh, that's good. That's do you know the difference, Marshall, of light through and light on? Light
Yeah, I
on is,
do.
yeah, light on is a mural, and light through is stained glass window,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
know.
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, that's funny because I have that breakdown right here And my friend who worked with McLuhan, she said that that films are light on like a mural, left brain more male. Movies are no, TV is light through. No, I'm sorry. TV is light through stained glass window, right brain, more female. TV is more female.
Mhm.
Movies are light on, mural, left brain, more male.
Yeah, and again, those are those, that's that problematic binary of male and
That's
female
that's
again.
that's why I can't bring that one up because the beginning is good, but when you add the male and
Yeah,
female,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
But she
outdated.
she tried to teach McLuhan, Bucky Fuller, Ivan Illich, and Norman Mailer goddess culture and feminism. So she it was amazing. You'll love the word she invented, splitteracy. When we when we invented printed word, we split our right and left hemispheres, and she spells splitteracy with a dollar sign.
Oh.
It's Mary Jane Schultz. She just passed. She was one of my mentors. She's okay. Here's another. We got a few more. Can you go a little more than
Oh,
10
yeah,
more
I'm
minutes?
fine. I'm
Okay,
fine.
good. Okay. You create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Buñuel nailed it. Thank God I'm an atheist. So it's basically, Gerry, any thoughts on this line? You create what you resist. I'm not saying you, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
Oh, yeah, yeah. When one um spends one's life opposing something,
Yeah,
and all energy goes into that stance of opposition,
yeah,
and it becomes a matter of definition, one very easily becomes a mirror of what one opposes.
yeah.
um yeah, I've seen that up close. People doing some some work against a local church authority, and I was actually on their side officially, but they were at least as authoritarian as the church,
Yeah.
as the local church leaders, and insufferable. And
Yeah.
at one point, and I was glad I was out of the country. I was glad I was out of the country. I was at a conference in Toronto. I was glad I wasn't even in the country when this happened. They actually disrupted mass, and this is unfortunately caught on tape. It's on the website of the Oregonian, or was, and it culminated in a dozen white people linking arms, singing "We Shall Overcome." So great, civil rights anthem. The priest that they were confronting, singing this song to, was the only one among them who was not only African American, he was African American from Africa. The level of cluelessness was astonishing. Yeah, anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's like, Gerry, a lot of times criticisms is you're stingy, and really what you're saying is I'm stingy, but I want to lay it on you because I don't want to face it myself.
yeah, yeah.
That's sort of like that. Okay, here's 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words.
Okay, okay.
1, who started it all?
God.
2, are we going to make it?
Yes.
3, where do we put it?
Um, in our hearts.
4, who's cleaning it up?
We are. We'd better.
5, is it serious?
Oh, very.
Wow. I love it. Where do we put it? I always tear up because very rarely people say in our hearts, and I love that answer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, how do you find peace of mind?
Say that again.
How do you
Oh,
find peace of mind?
every morning I sit down and do 20 or 30 minutes of meditation. And it's very simple. It's
Yeah,
just I'm become aware that I'm in the presence of the divine and just dwell there as much as possible without words, without images. And sometimes one of my cats comes and joins me. She gets on my lap, and I'm Catholic, but she's Catholic.
what's her name?
Gracie.
Gracie. That's great.
So she will join me in my meditation.
Well, tell her Gracie Allen ran for president in the 40s. Okay, if you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Yeah. I think I'd say you're going to be okay.
Yeah,
Really, you're okay now.
yeah,
Maybe you don't know it, but you really are, and it's really going to be all right.
beautiful. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over. I mean, if somebody does it under, that's grounds for divorce. It's
There is 95% say over. The patent, 100 years old, have it going over. But there's people who believe under's the way, and they have their reasons.
well, I don't care what their reasons are. They're sociopaths.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
It would be more to come.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Um, first thing, the smell of an old book.
Oh, no, that is the greatest smell. Smell of old used bookstores. Um, if a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Um, I would want it to be displayed in this very enclosed backyard, and I want it made of ice.
Oh, nice. I like that. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had and never won. $1,000,000.
Yep, that's the 3 answers I get the most: money, fame, and heroin.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
do it out
believe
here.
if you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Well, I would say to myself, just another day.
Thank you. I wish you could have met the guy who taught me that. He was just this old Altacocker, really brilliant guy on the Venice boardwalk. And it's sort of like a metaphor for life, and it's how you take it. But, one of my answers was on the Venice boardwalk, and this woman said, I'd take the bag of shit, the velocity, and I would use it to swoop my way out of the vat of vomit. I says, dude, that's the Descent of the Maelstrom by Edgar Allan Poe.
Edgar, yeah. That's
It was
very
amazing.
inventive. I'm
Yeah.
not capable of that.
Oh, here's one I haven't asked in years. You're on the last televised moment of the world. What would you say?
Well, it's been a trip.
What's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you?
Well, I was really talking about it already. In terms of my students, there's this really different attitude toward sexuality and sexual identity that's much more fluid,
Yeah.
gets away from the old binaries, the old expectations. And this is something you find in the writings of some of those post-humanists. it gets folded into all other kinds of things. So like the last book I read was called in this area. It was called Posthuman Feminism by Rosie Bradati,
Yeah.
and she describes posthuman feminism as including, eco consciousness, other kinds of social justice issues, prison reform, what have you. So it all gets folded together, and I'm really seeing in the students I teach this kind of consciousness emerging.
Yeah. It's really great. Since you have we can keep going. You don't mind? I'll add a couple bonus questions if you don't
Okay.
mind. Okay. What you described too is TSA, tactile situation awareness. That when the bomber gets hit, he doesn't have time to look at all the gauges in the airplane. He just has to act immediately on intuition and not identify with this program or that program or this dial. And that's what kids, I was told, are doing now more. We grew up, we identified with the book or the
Mhm.
transistor radio, and we identified. They're so expansive in what they're identifying with, they're less likely, so they're getting a bigger picture view, and
Yeah.
they're able to navigate through this with, like, it's sensory overload for me, you
Yeah.
know.
Are you were you referring to a writer in relationship to those ideas?
You mean who taught me TSA?
Yeah, yeah.
No, that was actually, again, that was Bob Dobbs who told me about TSA, but, no,
Okay.
if you're saying there is a writer who says that?
Oh, no, I just wanted to read up more about
Read
that.
more up on that. No, that was his theory, and I think it sort of resonates because, most of people our age will say, "Well, you got too many. You got TikTok, you got Instagram, you got email, you got text, you got cell phone." It's like, well, which one do you do the best? And which one can you do with me? That's what I want to know, if we're going to communicate, which one. But they like hook me up. And so there's so many, like, how do you navigate through all those?
Yeah.
And then that maybe that's like you're saying, we are capable of learning how to take in
Mhm.
information faster. Because the example you gave, someone said, Evelyn Wood speed reading, that way back, they were teaching us. But this is, Seamus Haney was written up in the New Yorker recently. Did you read that?
No, I need to re-up my New Yorker subscription.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
behind the times.
here's the letter to the editor. In 72, Haney said, poetry is out of the quarrel with ourselves, and the quarrel with others is rhetor-
Rhetoric.
rhetoric. No, he says rhetoric.
Oh,
Poetry is out of the quarrel with ourselves, and the quarrel with others is rhetoric.
yeah.
Then the woman suggests, well, he actually got that from Yeats. Yeats said, we make out of the quarrel with others rhetoric, but the quarrel with ourselves poetry.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, what does that mean to you? Is that Does that resonate with you, or how do you suss that
Yeah.
one out?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Um, Quarrel strikes me as uh, a somewhat false, quarrel with ourselves,
Yeah,
but it's about looking inward
yeah,
and articulating from that experience of inward, what Kierkegaard would call inwardness. But again, I think
inward.
that's another false binary because
Yeah,
rhetoric, I mean, a perfectly valid form of poetry is political. And a lot of Heaney's poetry touches on, what's referred to as the troubles in
yeah,
Ireland. Now, his is a very inward, very self-searching poetry, but it doesn't
yeah,
stop there.
yeah. Amazing. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. Who's entitled to make the rules?
Well, I think we all are.
Yeah,
We all need to participate.
that's good. And it's funny because the word freedom etymologically breaks down to the same thing, giving oneself one's own laws.
Hmm.
So the question, Gerry, is what does freedom mean to you now? And I'll set it up with two quotes. T.S. Eliot said, freedom is only truly freedom when it appears against the background of an artificial limitation, which caused Marshall to say, how are you to argue with people who insist on sticking their heads in the invisible teeth of technology, calling the whole thing freedom? So, what does freedom mean to you now?
Well, I like well, I actually like the idea that freedom is something we have to work for. It's not just a given. It requires exertion.
Yeah.
And so I think, for me, freedom means being able to use my abilities to write, to read, to teach.
Yeah.
I'm lucky, and it's because of a colleague of mine that I'm even able to do this. I'm lucky. I'm teaching a course at a prison this semester, a
Oh,
creative
that's
writing course, and it's half Lewis and Clark students, from the campus who go out and meet me there, and half inmates at the prison. It's because of a colleague. She's a history professor. She has been doing this for a dozen years or more. And she's getting, finally some of us are starting to step up and join her in this endeavor. So I'm the fourth member of the faculty to do this. And just the fact that, I'm at a point of, developing my teaching skills and interpersonal skills, such as they are, that I can do that. To me, that's a kind of freedom.
That's beautiful. It's also very honorable and courageous to do that. You have to listen to, or you don't have to check out this podcast I did with this woman who taught poetry in prison for many years, or taught writing maybe.
Yeah.
And I can't think of her name right off bat, but I will dig it up
Okay. Okay.
and
I want to hear that.
what she went through, I don't even want to describe right now. I just want you to check it out. You can read her book or listen to the podcast.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
Okay.
I
I'll
mean,
probably do both.
yeah. Okay, so what's a question that remains unresolved for you?
What comes to mind is, I think I've mentioned my Catholicism, and I've had the experience when I start describing what I actually believe, like about LGBTQ relations, and the emergence of this kind of consciousness is good. Sometimes people will say, "Well, you're not really Catholic,"
Yeah,
um, and it's not that I think Catholicism is superior.
yeah,
Because I think the divine is always offering, self-offering, and the way we respond. And as
yeah,
those responses become habitual, those become religious traditions, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Islam or whatever it is. Um, I'm Catholic because I grew up that way. It's a tradition that speaks to me, but a really unresolved question is, so what exactly is my relationship to this church that I
yeah,
disagree with so much, and yet find membership in? And I participate. I'm a sacristan, I'm a lector. I work with our refugee resettlement group.
yeah,
So it's not like I just show up and then leave.
yeah,
It's like I really, I'm a part of this. And it's in some ways just such a ridiculous institution that's done so much harm.
yeah,
I mean, I think the sexual abuse that has been enabled by this kind of closed off hierarchy is just
yeah.
foul.
Well, then going back to war, they always says wars are because of religion. But here's what I would say is what you brought up as a question is that's the resonating interval. You decided to do this and you know the other end of the spectrum It's sort of like McLuhan saying it has services and disservices. In other words, organized religion has services and disservices.
Mm-hmm.
Most
Mm-hmm.
people I interview our age have checked out. They don't want to go and say, I'm part of organized religion. It's very, very rare
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they go, oh, I was raised this. And I still like the one lady, I says, do you pray? She goes, yeah, for parking spaces. I mean, this is they go, they do this. They go, well, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual.
Yeah, and
So
I get that.
yeah, but they know that the religion has this ability to help form community,
Mm-hmm.
teach you singing together, stained glass window, our iconography. There's a lot of services, but the disservices of organized religion have outweighed in
Yeah.
many years that you got to stay away from that. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good question. How has writing and teaching writing shaped your behavior?
Well, what comes to mind is you earlier in this discussion, you paid me a compliment of being a good listener. I think it's helped me to be a better listener.
Yeah,
Because to be a good listener isn't just a set of external habits. I think it means having a sense of the person you're talking with. And I think
yeah,
literature has helped me to understand human interiorities, plural, better.
it's really good. One of the great Joyceans, I asked, how has studying Joyce and Finnegan's Wake shape your behavior? And he goes, made me more tolerant. I was like, wow,
Pretty good.
you know. Okay, two more. We're out of here. What a pleasure, Gerry. I appreciate this. This is Thornton Wilder in 1928, a true Wakean. He's got a book this thick of letters about Finnegan's Wake.
Oh, really? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
and Skin of Our Teeth is Campbell said he ripped it off from the Wake. It's like, well, so what?
Yeah.
Thornton Wilder is a heavy thinker. He said in 28, art is confession, art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 3 hours. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Mhm. First of all, I do want to say that in high school, I was in a production of Our Town. I was the second dead man, and my line was "A star's mighty good company." That aside,
That's a good one. That could be the answer too. A star is mighty good company.
maybe it may
Yeah.
be. Yeah, what's it all about? Well, again, it's. I mean, some of my poems are really. I just wrote this dramatic monologue of a priest um, about to leave the priesthood,
Yeah.
and for good reason. Um, so yeah, I have poems like that. I have poems that are quite angry, and other kinds of poems too, of course. But all that together somehow, I think it's finally it's about opening to the divine for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to put this aside one really quick. Have you read Thomas Merton much?
Obsessively, yeah. Since I was in
What
high school,
what do you get from Thomas?
constant search.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
never stopped. I mean, at first, you read Seven Story Mountain, and you see somebody trying to adhere to a pretty conventional view of Catholicism. And his first book, well, second book he wrote, there was my argument with the Gestapo that was published later. But you start reading through his career, especially that stuff he was writing in the 60s when he was in dialogue with Buddhism and, in touch with the civil rights movement. You see somebody who's constantly figuring out what it means to be Catholic all over again,
Yeah.
what it
Wow.
means to be a person of spirit all over again. I think that's what he was doing when he flew to Thailand to be in that to attend that conference, that monastic conference where he died.
Wow.
Yeah, I love Merton. I just love Merton. Yeah, he's been arguably he's helped me survive.
Amazing. Okay, last question, Gerry. What gives you the most optimism?
People like you.
Oh, God, what a pleasure.
People like you. Open thinkers. Um, just people are interested in continuing to ask questions.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because the first question I asked in part one was, what's the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said the best thing for a human being is another human being. And
Oh yeah, good.
the last question, what gives you the most optimism is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Gerry Harp. What I think your name, you are what your name is. You're a harp. You're like the angel, you know.
No, thank you, thank you.
You know,
The name is the blow from which no man ever recovers. That's McLuhan.
oh wow, that's a good one. That is that. Well, that's Joyce in The Wake. Love thy label as thyself.
Did he say name or did he say numb?
You mean Marshall?
Yeah.
We'll have to look it up. I'll tell you the guy who knows, who's doing the research. I've had him on my podcast several times. You'd love him. His name is Bill Kuhn, Kuhn. He's writing this book called The Marshalling Machine. And it's every great McLuhanism, the source where it came from, and then in categories like
Wow.
on art. And you know, he's the
Amazing.
one, he's got the way to do it. So what
Yeah.
was the Marshall line again? You just
Just a second.
yeah.
Because I've got understanding media right here. If I remember correctly, it's on page 35.
Oh, okay.
See if I'm right about that.
Yeah. Oh, I love people who know that. You know, a book you got to get is Understanding Me. Did you see that book?
No, no.
Understanding Me is one of Marshall's daughters took like 10 speeches and transcribed them. And
Oh,
in
really?
yeah, on page 254 of that book, he explains really what the medium is the message means. Because it's really hard to get that. People kind of miss, they get it halfway, and that's fine, but
Again, in a visual and highly literate culture, when we meet a person for the first time, his visual appearance dims out the sound of the name, so that in self defense we add, how do you spell your name? Whereas in an ear culture, the sound of a man's name is the overwhelming fact, as Joyce knew when he said in Finnegan's Wake, who gave you that numb? For, and then McLuhan goes on, for the name of a man is a numbing blow from which he never recovers.
that is good. Page 35 of Understanding Media.
Just a second. It turned out to be a little bit earlier than that. 32.
32. That is good. Thank you. What edition was that?
This one.
Oh, Understanding Media, that edition. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well,
Introduction by Lewis Lapham.
oh, Lewis just died. What a great guy,
Oh, did he
man.
really?
Yeah. Oh, what an amazing, those magazines he put out. What are they called? Oh my God, they are
Oh,
amazing.
that's right. He quit Harper's and he started that. Yeah, and I forgot now what they're called too.
I got one right by my bed, and it's the issue on music. It's unbelievable. He's brilliant. But I do hope we'll meet more in the future on these salons, because sometimes we have these like what 4 or 6 people, and then we get it. Like I really want to do the aphorism one where we all bring 3 aphorisms and then we try to reword them on the spot.
Well, that sounds great.
Yeah. And I look forward to more Finnegan's Wake with you, Gerry. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time and energy. Even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button, I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever.
Same here, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank you.
so